Thank you for joining me on this adventure. Your presence means the world to me. Welcome, everyone, to our latest video where we'll be exploring Russian mafia. The Russian mafia, or otherwise referred to as Bratva, is a collective of various organized crime-related elements originating in the former Soviet Union (FSU). Any of the mafia's groups may be referred to as an organized criminal group (OPG). This is sometimes modified to include a specific name, such as the Orekhovskaya OPG. The P in the initialism comes from the Russian word for criminal. Sometimes, the Russian word is dropped in favor of a full translation, and OCG is used instead of OPG. In 2012, there were as many as 6,000 groups, with more than 200 of them having a global reach. Criminals of these various groups are either former prison members, corrupt officials and business leaders, people with ethnic ties, or people from the same region with shared criminal experiences and leaders. In December 2009, Timur Lakhonin, the head of the National Central Bureau of Interpol within Russia, stated, "Certainly, there is crime involving our former compatriots abroad, but there is no data suggesting that an organized structure of criminal groups comprising former Russians exists abroad on the topic of international Russian criminal gangs." In August 2010, Alain Bauer, a criminologist from France, said that the Russian mafia is one of the best structured criminal organizations in Europe, with a quasi-military operation in their international activities. The Russian mafia is similar to the Italian crime groups in many ways, in that the group's organizations and structures follow a similar model. The two groups also share a similar portfolio of criminal activity. The highly publicized Sicilian mafia is believed to have inspired early criminal groups in Russia to form mafia-like organizations, eventually spawning their own version. The Russian mafia, however, differed from the Sicilians due to their environment. The level of political corruption and arms sales in post-Soviet Russia allowed for their massive expansion, as well as the incorporation of many government officials into the crime syndicates. Russian mafia groups have also been involved in uranium trading, stolen from the Soviet nuclear program, and human trafficking, among other serious activities. In the following segment, we'll be examining origins in greater detail. Today's Russian organized crime can be traced back to the Russian Empire in the form of banditry and thievery, but it was not until after the establishment of the Soviet Union that certain emerged as the leaders of prison groups throughout forced labor camps with a generally well-defined code of honor. In the aftermath of World War I in 1945, the death of Joseph Stalin in 1953, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, more gangs emerged in a flourishing black market that exploited the unstable governments of the FSU. American attorney Louis Freeh, who headed the Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) between 1993 and 2001, said that the Russian mafia posed the greatest threat to the United States in the mid-years. When the Bolshevik Revolution came around in 1917, the thieves' world was alive and active. Vladimir Lenin attempted to wipe them out, but it failed, and the criminals survived into Joseph Stalin's reign. Without wasting any more time, let's jump into the fascinating world of Soviet era. During Stalin's reign as ruler, millions of people were sent to Gulags, Soviet labor camps, where powerful criminals worked their way up to become Voromy Zakon thieves in law. These criminal elites often conveyed their status through complicated tattoos, symbols still used by Russian mobsters. After Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union during World War II, Stalin recruited more men to fight for the nation, offering prisoners freedom if they joined the army. Many flocked to help out in the war, but this act betrayed the codes of the thieves' world that one must not ally with the government. Those who chose not to fight in the war referred to the traitors as Sukhabich, and the traitors landed at the bottom of the hierarchy. Outcasts, the Suki separated from the others and formed their own groups and power bases by collaborating with prison officials, eventually gaining the luxury of comfortable positions. Bitterness between the groups erupted into a series of bitch wars from 1945 to 1953, with many killed every day. The prison officials encouraged the violence, seeing it as a way to rid the prisons of criminals. Then, in the URSS, Mikhail Gorbachev loosened restrictions on private businesses, allowing them to grow legally, but by then, the Soviet Union was already beginning to collapse. Also during the URSS, the United States expanded its immigration policies, allowing Soviet Jews, with most settling in a southern Brooklyn area known as Brighton Beach, sometimes nicknamed Little Odessa. Here is where Russian organized crime began in the US. The earliest known case of Russian crime in the area was in the mid-URSS by the Potato Bag Gang, a group of con artists disguised as merchants that told customers that they were selling antique gold rubles for cheap, but in fact gave them bags of potatoes when bought in thousands. By 1983, the head of Russian organized crime in Brighton Beach was Essie Agron. Howell Mirzian was a prime target among other mobsters, including rival Boris Goldberg and his organization, and in May 1985, Agron was assassinated. Boris Bieber-Nefeld, his bodyguard, moved on to employ under Marat Baligula, who was believed to have succeeded Agron's authority. In the following year, Baligula fled the country after he was convicted in a fraud scheme of Merrill Lynch customers and was found in Frankfurt, West Germany, in 1989, where he was extradited back to the US and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Baligula would later be convicted on a separate $360,000 credit card fraud in 1992. Nefeld took Baligula's place, partnering with the Polish Al Capone, Ricardo Fanchinian, in an import-export business and setting up a heroin business. In 1990, his former friend, Minya Elson, back from a 6-year prison sentence in Israel, returned to America and set up a rival heroin business, culminating in a mafia turf war. Brace yourself for a captivating discussion on growth and internationalization as we explore its nuances and implications. When the USSR collapsed and a free market economy emerged, organized criminal groups began to take over Russia's economy, with many ex-KGB agents and veterans of the Afghan War offering their skills to the crime bosses. Gangster summit meetings had taken place in hotels and restaurants shortly before the Soviets' dissolution, so that top Voroby Zakon could agree on who would rule what, and set plans on how to take over the post-communist states. In the URSS, in Russia and other post-Soviet countries, vast deposits of natural resources and businesses that the state had owned for decades were privatized. Former Soviet bureaucrats, factory directors, aggressive businessmen, and criminal organizations used insider deals, bribery, and simple brute force to grab lucrative assets. Businesses began building their own private armies of security agents, bodyguards, and commercial spies. They often bought the people and weapons of the former Soviet state or even those of the current Russian police. Russia's new capitalists spent millions of dollars for protection, buying armor-plated cars, bomb sensors, hidden cameras, bulletproof vests, anti-wiretapping gear, and weapons, recruiting veterans of the Afghan and Chechen wars as their bodyguards. However, almost every business in Russia, from curbside vendors to huge oil and gas companies, made payments to organized crime for protection Krisha. Businessmen said that they needed the Krisha because the laws and the court system were not functioning properly in Russia. The only way for them to enforce a contract was to turn to a criminal Krisha. They also used it to intimidate competitors, enforce contracts, collect debts, or take over new markets. It was also becoming increasingly common for Russian businesses to turn to the Red Krisha, the corrupt police who doubled as a paid protection racket. Contract killings were common. It was the period of internationalization of Russian organized crime. It was agreed that Vyacheslav Yaponchik-Ivankov would be sent to Brighton Beach in 1992, allegedly because he was killing too many people in Russia and also to take control of Russian organized crime in North America. Within a year, he built an international operation that included but was not limited to narcotics, money laundering, and prostitution and made ties with the American mafia and Colombian drug cartels, eventually extending to Miami, Los Angeles, and Boston. Prior to Ivankov's arrival, Aligar's downfall left a void for America's next foray vice cone. Minir Elson, leader of Minir's Brigada, a gang that similarly operated from Russia to Los Angeles to New York, was in a feud with Boris Neifeld, with bodies dropping on both sides. Ivankov's arrival virtually ended the feud, although Elson would later challenge his power as well, and a number of attempts were made to end the former's life. Neifeld and Elson would eventually be arrested in January 1994, released in 1998, and in Italy in 1995, respectively. According to FBI reports, the crime boss Semyon Mogilevich had alliances with the Camorra, in particular with Salvatore DeFalco, a lower echelon member of the Giuliano clan. Mogilevich and DeFalco would have held meetings in Prague in 1993. Semyon Mogilevich's net worth is estimated to be $10 billion. Ivankov's reign also ended in June 1995 when a $3.50 million extortion attempt on two Russian businessmen, Alexander Volkov and Vladimir Voloshin, ended in an FBI arrest that resulted in a 10-year maximum security prison sentence. Before his arrest and besides his operations in America, Ivankov regularly flew around Europe and Asia to maintain ties with his fellow mobsters like members of the Solntseevskaya Bratva, as well as reinforce ties with others. This did not stop other people from denying his growing power. In one instance, Ivankov attempted to buy out Georgian boss Valery Globoskluj's drug importation business. When the latter refused the offer, he and his top associates were shot dead. A summit held in May 1994 in Vienna rewarded him with what was left of Gluj's business. 2 months later, Ivankov got into another altercation with drug kingpin and head of the Orekhovskaya gang, Sergei Sylvester Timofeev, ending with the latter murdered a month later. In 1995, the Camorra cooperated with the Russian mafia in a scheme in which the Camorra would bleach out as bills and reprint them as Rs. These bills would then be transported to the Russian mafia for distribution in 29 post-Eastern Bloc countries and former Soviet republics. In return, the Russian mafia paid the Camorra with property including a Russian bank and firearms, smuggled into Eastern Europe and Italy. A report by the United Nations in 1995 placed the number of individuals involved in organized crime in Russia at 3 million, employed in about 5,700 gangs. Back in Eastern Europe in May 1995, Semyon Mogilevich held a summit meeting of Russian mafia bosses in his Uholobu restaurant in Andal, a neighborhood of Prague. The excuse to bring them together was that it was a birthday party for Viktor Overin, the second in command of the Solntseevskaya Bratva. However, Major Tomas Makasik of the Czech police got wind of an anonymous tip-off that claimed that the Solntseevskaya were planning to assassinate Mogilevich at the location. It was rumored that Mogilevich and Solntseevskaya leader Sergei Mikhailov had a dispute over $5 million, and the police successfully raided the meeting. 200 guests were arrested, but no charges were put against them. Only key Russian mafia members were banned from the country, most of whom moved to Hungary. One person who was not there was Mogilevich himself. He claimed that by the time I arrived at Uholobu, everything was already in full swing, so I went into a neighboring hotel and sat in the bar there until about 5 or 6 in the morning. Mikhailov would later be arrested in Switzerland in October 1996 on numerous charges, including that he was the head of a powerful Russian mafia group, but was exonerated and released 2 years later after evidence was not enough to prove much. The global extent of Russian organized crime was not realized until Ludwig Tarzan Feinberg was arrested in January 1997, primarily because of arms dealing. In 1990, Feinberg moved from Brighton Beach to Miami and opened up a strip club called Porky's, which soon became a popular hangout for underworld criminals. Feinberg himself gained a reputation as an ambassador among international crime groups, becoming especially close to Juan Almeida, a Colombian cocaine dealer. Planning to expand his cocaine business, Feinberg acted as an intermediary between Almeida and the corrupt Russian military. He helped him get 6 Russian military helicopters in 1993, and in the following year, helped arrange to buy a submarine for cocaine smuggling. Unfortunately for the two of them, federal agents had been keeping a close eye on Feinberg for months. Alexander Yosevich, an associate of the Russian military contact and an undercover DEA agent, was sent to verify the illegal dealing, and in 1997, Feinberg was finally arrested in Miami. Facing the possibility of life imprisonment, the latter agreed to testify against Almeida in exchange for a shorter sentence, which ended up being 33 months. They published a website in 2000 containing Philip Bolkov's MOST group security database along with files from IUOP and other departments and special services. Vanuatu was a preferred location for Russian mafia laundering money. Now, let's shift our perspective and explore it present through a fresh lens, unlocking new perspectives. As the 21st century dawned, the Russian mafia remained after the death of Aslan Yusoyan. New mafia bosses sprang up, while imprisoned ones were released. Among the released were Morat Balagula and Vyacheslav Ivankov, both in 2004. The latter was extradited to Russia, but was jailed once more for his alleged murders of 2 Turks in a Moscow restaurant in 1992. He was cleared of all charges and released in 2005. 4 years later, he was assassinated by a shot in the stomach from a sniper. Meanwhile, Menya Elson and Leonid Reutemann were arrested in March 2006 for an unsuccessful murder plot against 2 Kiev-based businessmen. In 2009, FBI agents in Moscow targeted 2 suspected mafia leaders and 2 other corrupt businessmen. One of the leaders is Yevgeny Voskin, a criminal who had been in prison with Ivankov in 1995 and was deported in 2001 for breaking immigration regulations. The other is Konstantin Ginsburg, who was reportedly the current big boss of Russian organized crime in America before his reported assassination in 2009, it being suspected that Ivankov handed over control to him. In the same year, Semyon Mogilevich was placed on the FBI 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list for his involvement in a complex multi-million-dollar scheme that defrauded investors in the stock of his company YBM Magnix International, swindling them out of $150 million. He was indicted in 2003 and arrested in 2008 in Russia on tax fraud charges, but because the US does not have an extradition treaty with Russia, he was released on bail. Menya Elson said, in 1998, that Mogilevich is the most powerful mobster in the world. Around the world, Russian mafia groups have popped up as dominating particular areas. Russian organized crime has a rather large stronghold in the city of Atlanta where members are distinguished by their tattoos. Russian organized crime was reported to have a stronger grip in the French Riviera region and Spain in 2010, and Russia was branded as a virtual mafia state according to the WikiLeaks cables. According to recordings released in 2015, Alexander Litvinenko, shortly before he was assassinated, claimed that Semyon Mogilevich has had a good relationship with Vladimir Putin since the ERS. On 7 June 2017, 33 Russian mafia affiliates and members were arrested and charged by the FBI, US Customs and Border Protection and NYPD for extortion, racketeering, illegal gambling, firearm offenses, narcotics trafficking, wire fraud, credit card fraud, identity theft, fraud on casino slot machines using electronic hacking devices, based in Atlantic City and Philadelphia, murder for hire conspiracy and cigarette trafficking. They were also accused of operating secret and underground gambling dens based in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, and using violence against those who owed gambling debts, establishing nightclubs to sell drugs, plotting to force women associates to rob male strangers by seducing and drugging them with chloroform, and trafficking over £10,000 of stolen chocolate confectionery. The chocolate was stolen from shipment containers. It is believed that 27 of the arrested are connected to the Russian mafia Shulay clan, which are largely based in New York. On 26 September 2017, as part of a 4-year investigation, 100 Spanish civil guard officers carried out 18 searches in different areas of Malaga, Spain related to Russian mafia large-scale money laundering. The raids resulted in the arrests of 11 members and associates of the Orekhovskaya and Izmailovskaya clans. Money, firearms and 23 high-end vehicles were also seized. The owner of Marbella FC, Alexander Grinberg, and manager of AFK Sistema, a Spanish football club in Malaga, were among those arrested. On 19 February 2018, 18 defendants were accused of laundering over $62 million through real estate, including with the help of Vladislav Reznik, former chairman of Rossistrak, one of Russia's largest insurance companies. The accused stood trial in Spain. The Tambov and militia of Russian mafia organizations were involved. Alexander Tushin is allegedly a high-ranking Russian mafia boss. Moving on to the next segment, we have structure and composition. In the Russian mafia, the plural, vori literally, thief is an honorary title analogous to a made man in the Sicilian and Italian-American mafia. The honor of becoming over is given only when the recruit shows considerable leadership skills, personal ability, intellect, and charisma. A pacan or another high-ranking member of an organization can decide if the recruit will receive such title. When you become a member of the world, you have to accept the code of the zakon thief in law. Let's now turn our attention to notable Russian mafia bosses and examine its role within a larger context. Zachary Kuleshov, born 1953, currently widely believed to be one of the most prominent members of the Russian mafia. Vyacheslav Ivankov, believed to have connections with Russian state intelligence organizations and their organized crime partners. Vladimir Kumarin, born 1956, former deputy president of the Petersburg Fuel Company (PTK) between 1998 and 1999, and the boss of the criminal Tambovskaya Bratva Tambov gang of St. Petersburg. Sergei Mikhailov, born 1958, businessman and leader of the Orekhovskaya Bratva criminal syndicate. Semyon Mogilevich, born 1946, described by agencies in the European Union and United States as the boss of all bosses of most Russian mafia syndicates in the world. Aslan Yusoyan, according to operational data and media materials, he was the leader of Caucasian criminal groups, in particular, the Tbilisi and Yazidis clans, as well as one of the most powerful criminal leaders and thieves in law in Russia. Taryal Oniony, born 1952, believed to be the leader of the Kutaisi gang, considered the most influential ethnic Georgian organized crime group in Russia. Get ready for a captivating exploration as we unravel the layers of notable individual groups and their profound significance. Groups based in and around the city of Moscow. Orekhovskaya gang, founded by Sergei Sylvester Timofeev, this group reached its height in Moscow in the years. When Timofeev died, Sergei Butrin took his place. However, he was sentenced to jail for life in 2011. Lyubritskaya Bratva or Lyubri, one of the largest criminal groups with around 3,000 members in late years until today. Based in and originating from Lyubitsy district of Moscow. Led by Denis Sergeant Fraser since the years. Orekhovskaya Bratva, led by Sergei Mikhailov. It is Russia's largest criminal group with about 5,000 members, and is named after the Orekhovskaya district, one of Russia's oldest modern gangs. It was started in the mid to late years by Oleg Ivanov. It has around members in Moscow alone, and is named after the Izmailovo district. Izmailovskaya has good relations with the Podolskaya gang. Anton Malevsky was the leader until his death in 2001. The Izmailovskaya mafia is closely associated with Oleg Deripaska, Matvey Yakov, Michael Cherny, and Iskander Makhmudov through their Switzerland-based Blonde investment company, and is closely associated with Oleg Andreevich Karchenko and Vladimir Putin's SPAG. Liechtenstein police proved that Rudolf Ritter, brother to Michael Ritter, a financial minister, a Liechtenstein-based lawyer, jurist who practiced in offshore businesses identification evasion, and financial manager for the accounts of both Putin's OPG and the Izmailovskaya mafia, and that Alexander Afanasyev Afonia was connected to both OPG and the Izmailovskaya mafia through his Panama-registered Earl Holding AG. Also, Rudolf Ritter signed for Earl Holding, Burger International Holding, Reapers Trading SA and Fox Consulting. The Colombia-based Cali KGB cartel supplied cocaine to the Izmailovskaya mafia, too. Rudolf Ritter was arrested in May 2020 on money laundering charges. One of the richest with its common fund kept in the United States. Located in the Podolsky, Chekovsky, and Sepakhovsky districts of the Moscow region and beyond, including close relations with mafia in the United States and Belgium. Their focus is oil and extortion. They provided support to Anatoly Bykov. Groups based in other parts of Russia and the former Soviet Union. Dolgoprodninskaya Gang, Russia's second largest criminal group. Originally from the city of Dolgoprodny. Led by billionaire oligarch Matveyakov. It is reported that Matveyakov is ranked by the Russian-language publication Business Street Petersburg as one of the wealthiest men in St. Petersburg, with a net worth of 1.4 trillion rubles, $16 billion, attributed largely to underground and illegal activities. He is also reported to be on very good terms with Vladimir Putin. The Tambov Gang of St. Petersburg is very closely aligned with, who is the head of the Federal Drug Control Service, Alexander Bastrykin, who is the head of the Investigative Committee, Japanese Yakuza from Kobe and Osaka, and with the political rise of Vladimir Putin. Putin's longtime personal bodyguard, Viktor Zolotov, is very close to this group as well. The man most associated with them is Vladimir Komarin. The Komarovskaya organized criminal group leader Koma controls the St. Petersburg-Vyborg highway, called Scandinavia, or the Russia part of the European Highway E, which includes everything along the road: hotels, repair garages, cafes and restaurants, etc. And the transportation process, as well as St. Petersburg's trucking businesses. Orekhovskaya OPG steal automobiles, commit robberies, provide protection racketeering, and receives strong support from the Sviatsev-Patersky gang and its AOZT to organize the supply of cocaine from South America into Russia, Finland, Scandinavia and Europe, and the trade in counterfeit dollars. The Sviatsev-Patersky gang AOZT, led by Vladimir Patersky Vova, one-armed, and Leonid Yanovich Sviatsev Lenya, sportsman, organizes both the supply of cocaine from South America into Russia, Finland, Scandinavia and Europe, and the trade in counterfeit dollars, and works closely with the Komarovskaya organized criminal group. Both Patersky and Sviatsev have large estates in the Czech Republic where they enjoy hunting. During the URSS, Sambo coach Trudar Sviatsev, who was imprisoned for rape, robbery and theft, coached Vladimir Putin, Arkady Rotenberg, Boris Rotenberg and Nikolai Kononov. The Uzbek criminals in Litvinenko's Uzbek file, including Michael Cherny, Daufer Rakimov, Vyacheslav Ivankov, and Salim Abduvaliyev, also spelled Salim Abdulov, are Uzbek origin KGB and later FSB officers at Moscow, including Colonel Evgeny Kokholkov, were organized by Vladimir Putin while Putin was deputy mayor for economic affairs of St. Petersburg in the early years, and control Afghanistan origin drug trade through St. Petersburg, Russia, and then to Europe. Boris Berezovsky told Litvinenko to brief his Uzbek file about corrupt FSB officers to the future head of the FSB Putin, which Litvinenko did on 25 July 1998, and, later, Litvinenko was imprisoned. Robert Eringer, head of Monaco's security service, confirmed Litvinenko's file about Vladimir Putin as a kingpin in Europe's narcotics trade. The Colombia-based Cali KGB cartel supplied cocaine to this network, too. The Slonovskaya gang was one of the strongest and violent criminal groups in CIS in the URSS. It was based in Ryazan city. It had a long-term bloody wars with other active criminal groups in the city Aeropotovskaya, Koketkovsky, etc., with which it initially coexisted peacefully. The gang virtually disappeared by 2000 as its members were getting hunted down and imprisoned by local Russian police. The Romish gang of Yekaterinburg. The Chechen mafia is one of the largest ethnic organized crime groups operating in the former Soviet Union next to established Russian mafia groups. The Georgian mafia is regarded as one of the biggest, powerful and influential criminal networks in Europe, which has produced the biggest number of thieves in law in all former USSR countries. The Mkedriani was a paramilitary group involved in organized crime led by a thief in law Yoba Iselini in Georgia in the Urs. The city of Kazan was known for its gang culture, which later progressed into more organized, mafisk groups. This was known as the Kazan phenomenon. Groups based in other areas Brothers Circle, headed by Temuri Mirzaev. This multi-ethnic transnational group is composed of leaders and senior members of several Eurasian criminal groups largely based in countries of the former Soviet Union but operating in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. In 2011, US President Barack Obama and his administration named it one of 4 transnational organized crime groups that posed the greatest threat to US national security, and sanctioned certain key members and froze their assets. A year later, he extended the national emergency against them for another year. The Semyon Mogilevich organization, based in Budapest, Hungary and headed by the crime boss of the same name, this group numbered approximately 250 members as of 1996. Its business is often connected with that of the Saltsevskaya Bratva and the Vyacheslav Ivankov organization. Alexei Anatolyevich Lugakov is the second in command, and Vitaly Borisovich Savalovsky is the underboss to Mogilevich. Share this video with your friends and spread the knowledge.